Hi, my name's Dan, and this video is one in a series of videos that I'm doing on magic systems and the design of magic systems for video games, which is in turn part of a larger suite of videos on my channel about game design issues. And in this one, I'm going to present some design thoughts about about magic systems. Let's be specific, yes. Before we kick into some specific thoughts, I thought I would remind you of all of my my game design rules. If you've been looking at videos that I've done, you'll have seen occasionally I pop up one of these rules. I'm just going to do the whole lot of them back to back because they all apply to the design of magic systems. So I hope you enjoy that interlude. Let's crack on into some specific design thoughts then for magic systems for games. So magic is special. It has to be because otherwise it's not really magic. So as a designer, you need to make it feel wondrous. It needs to have this kind of sense of awe and potentially fun, but also a feeling of power to it, and giving the player this feeling of power is a great thing. You need lights and sounds and to make it, you know, multimedia visual stuff. I'm just gonna quickly duck into World of Warcraft and show a druid casting 3 spells quickly in a row, and I want you to just kind of, as it's happening, look and think about the sounds and the visuals that are going on. Okay, moving on. Be imaginative. So, magic is a brilliant area to let your imagination out. This is a fireball spell, and fireball spells have a certain amount of power to them, but how many games have a fireball spell in it? This is, you might want to have it in, but it's not that imaginative. However, a spell where 50 rabbits are spontaneously created out of nowhere, I guess there's a question about how useful is that, but it's certainly imaginative and different. And the player might be able to think of all sorts of interesting ways in which to use it. Even if not, they're going to have fun with this. So allow the player to have fun and let your imagination run wild. Magic is you're outside that box of possibilities. So as a designer, I would strongly encourage you to embrace that. So my next thought is encourage creativity. And that's not just your own creativity, obviously, but actually for the player. So I'm sure I have banged on about this principle elsewhere in my game design videos. If not, then I probably should have done. But here we go. I think that some real quality can come in computer games when the challenges that you give to players don't have fixed solutions. And sometimes I get frustrated when I'm playing games, and it could be a puzzle game, and there is one obvious solution once you find it, and only one. And there are a whole load of action games that when they tell you what you need to achieve, they tell you need to stand here and use this gun and shoot that person and that person. And being led by the nose in terms of how you achieve what the game is wanting you to achieve isn't a great deal of fun. It's much more interesting if you supply a set of tools for the player to use and then give them problems that they need to solve using those tools without necessarily having a fixed idea of one solution. And there may be several solutions. And this is where actually emergent gameplay comes from, is when you create situations like this and systems where the players can have all sorts of tools. They might sort of interact to each other and use the cause and effect to do various things. I think there's a design necessity that goes along with that, which is, and particularly important with magic systems, I think, when you're doing this, is that you need to have some kind of consistency. So if you have some trees in your game that will burn because you've created these trees that will burn in a situation where you want the player to think of burning the trees as part of the solution to the problem that they're facing, but you've got trees elsewhere in the game that don't burn, that's inconsistent. And players will accept these things, especially if you visually indicate which ones will burn and which ones won't. But it can be a bit disappointing. But then this does mean that if you're giving the player these tools and then making it consistent throughout the game, that you do need to have some thought about the consequences of the player having these abilities. So, for example, if you have a spell that allows players to walk through walls, then all sorts of things could be done with that, but actually all sorts of things that the player might be able to do that you don't want them to be able to do. And in my mind now, suddenly I'm getting a thought about the game Portal, which I hope you've played. If you haven't played Portal as a game designer, you really should, because it's a brilliant game. But they had two categories of walls. They had walls you could create portals in and walls you couldn't create portals in. And they kind of justified it, but it did have this... They were clear, but it might have been more consistent to have all walls, but some of their problems wouldn't have worked in that situation. Okay, where are we going next? Right, so I'm going to talk about the opposite end of this spectrum. So dull magic, which is where you do provide a solution and a problem. So here's an example. We've got an explosion spell. It might look like this. And we've got a cracked wall. It might look like this. And immediately you should be cottoning on to what I'm talking about here. Explosion spell equals, cracked wall equals use the explosion spell here. And this is very much definitely a single problem with a single straightforward one-to-one relationship of a solution. And then you repeat this several times. And this sort of thing is used in games quite a lot, and it can be used reasonably well, but it isn't really stretching the imagination of what you could do with magic. I think the last thing I want to talk about is magic systems with internal logic. So it is possible to create magic systems where there is some kind of logic to them, and I've quite often seen this when you have, for example, element-based magic. So you've got maybe the 4 elements, the traditional set, earth, fire, and water. There are other sets that are around there, and then you use these as the basis for magic. There's a great game called Magica, which uses a similar system to this, and you can combine elements together in different ways, and it's got a huge amount of internal logic and a whole load of creativity to it, and it's great. You don't have to go down that route. You could just have, a list of spells and use your imagination, and it doesn't have to be explained why this magic works. So it's entirely up to you. If you do have internal logic, there are some pros and cons. So I'm going to quickly run through my thoughts on this. So the first one is that internal logic gives limitations to the magic. And that is a pro, because limitations for the player actually engender creativity. And I don't know if you've encountered the idea before that if you're given a design task or something you're trying to design, and there's quite stringent limitations to what you can do, then this gives rise to all sorts of creative solutions. And limitations can be a great thing in terms of giving an experience. It aids design. So once you've started down an internal logic, you then can think through the consequences, and this can lead you very quickly into thinking about what sort of spells you might want, what kind of mechanics you might have. It can give a feel of realism. This consistency, it helps this kind of feeling that it's something that works, and it avoids the Deus ex machina solution to problems where this is the thing that's sometimes complained about with stories, in that if you provide a problem, some big cataclysmic problem near the end, and then suddenly the cavalry arrive, or suddenly you find that you've got a spell that will just instantly solve this particular situation, it feels a bit cheaty, and this phenomenon is called Deus ex machina, which means the god in the machine. And it's frowned on. It limits possibilities when you're designing. So this is now a negative. You might have a particular idea for the spell that generates 50 rabbits simultaneously, but it just doesn't fit with the internal logic of your magic. So it won't allow you to have that. So that is potentially a negative. And it potentially reduces the sense of wonder, because once you start to understand it, then in some ways it ceases to be magic. I would potentially claim that any magic system that is perfectly explained becomes physics instead of magic. Anyway, that has been some thoughts about some of the design aspects of magic systems and games, and I will confess that actually there are several more videos in this series to come, and there will be more design thoughts on specific aspects as I go along. These were just some general thoughts. But that's it from me for now.